In the heart of Riverton, a quiet town known for its close-knit community, one woman's life was turned upside down. Briana Walker, an innocent teacher, was wrongfully arrested by a police officer who had no idea what was coming next. 30 minutes later, the FBI stormed the station, changing everything in a shocking twist. But why did this happen? And how did Briana take justice into her own hands? Before we dive into this intense journey, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss the twist coming up. It was a quiet morning in the small town of Riverton, where most people knew each other's names, and the streets felt safe. A community of families, friends, and longtime residents, where the sound of children playing echoed through the neighborhoods, and the chatter of coffee shop regulars filled the air. But that morning, something was off. A dark cloud loomed over the usual calm. Briana Walker, a well-known teacher at Riverton High School, was heading out of her home on her way to work. She was in her mid-30s, confident, intelligent, and loved by her students. As she reached her car in the driveway, she noticed something strange. A police car was parked at the end of the street, but Briana thought nothing of it. After all, there was no reason for concern. However, just as she pulled out onto the main road, two officers quickly approached her vehicle with alarming speed. Briana's heart rate quickened as the officers waved for her to pull over. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong, but she remained calm. Briana had lived in Riverton all her life and had always believed in the good of people, never imagining this would be the day everything would change. "Step out of the vehicle," one of the officers shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. Briana's mind raced, but she complied. She had never been in trouble with the law before. Was there some mistake? What had she done wrong? "Hands up, now," the second officer barked. Briana's eyes widened as she tried to process what was happening. Was she being detained? The officers were treating her as if she were a criminal, their tone cold and aggressive. She hadn't even done anything, yet they were treating her like a suspect. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," the first officer stated, a look of disdain on his face. Confusion hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Arrest? For what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Shut up. Just follow instructions," the second officer snapped. Before she could say another word, the officers cuffed her wrists behind her back. Briana could hardly believe what was happening, her mind spinning as she was pushed into the back of the police car. It all felt like a nightmare, a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. As she sat in the back of the squad car, struggling to make sense of it all, her thoughts drifted to the one thing that kept her grounded, her family. She couldn't believe this was happening to her. What had she done to deserve this treatment? Why was she being taken away, and why had they been so rough with her? She had no answers, just a flood of questions she couldn't seem to get out of her head. Minutes later, she was brought into the local police station, where she was thrown into a holding cell. Her heart raced as she sat on the cold, hard bench. The noise of the station echoed through the building, but it felt distant and muffled to her. Was this real? It was all happening so fast. She hadn't even had time to think. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of her control. Why was she in here? Her mind replayed the moments before her arrest, desperately searching for some kind of explanation. But it didn't make sense. She had been polite, cooperative. She had done nothing wrong. As Briana sat in the small cell, the reality of the situation began to sink in. She had been wrongfully arrested. The confusion in her mind was quickly replaced with a seething anger. She knew the system wasn't perfect, but she never imagined it would fail her like this, especially not in Riverton, where she thought she knew the people in charge. And then, just when Briana thought things couldn't get any worse, the door to the holding cell opened. But instead of an officer, it was someone else, someone who would change everything. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the hallway as a group of agents stormed into the station. The tension in the air was palpable. Briana's head shot up as she saw the FBI agents in their dark suits, their faces unreadable, their movements precise. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of the agents asked, his tone soft but authoritative. Briana looked at him, confused and scared. "I don't understand what's happening." Briana's voice trembled, but she kept her head high. She was determined not to let her fear show. "We've been notified of a situation involving an illegal arrest," the agent said, his gaze hardening. "We've received intelligence that you've been wrongfully detained by these officers. We're here to take over." The words hit her like a tidal wave. The FBI was here? They had been alerted about her arrest. How did they know? Who had called them? Briana's mind raced with more questions, but she could hardly process them. The FBI was about to do something, and she could only hope that justice would finally be served. She couldn't help but wonder, though, who had tipped them off. Was someone watching over her? Who had made this possible? Before she could speak, the agent stepped forward and gave a signal to his team. In a matter of seconds, the officers who had arrested Briana were pulled away from their posts, their faces shifting from confidence to panic as the FBI agents moved in. Briana stood up from the bench, still in shock. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. This was her moment, her chance to find out what had really happened. She needed to know how and why she had been wrongfully arrested, but as the agents worked quickly to resolve the situation, one question kept echoing in her mind. Who was behind this, and why had they gone to such lengths to make sure she was arrested? What was this all leading to? The FBI agents moved swiftly, their calm professionalism contrasting sharply with the chaos in the station. As they pulled the arresting officers away, the tension in the room seemed to shatter. Briana stood in stunned silence, watching as the officers who had so forcefully detained her were now questioned. Their power, once absolute, now seemed to vanish in the presence of the federal agents. Briana was led out of the holding cell and into a small interrogation room. The agent who had spoken to her earlier followed closely behind. He introduced himself as Agent Harris, his sharp, focused gaze never leaving her as he sat down across from her. "We've been briefed on the situation, Ms. Walker." His voice was firm but not unkind. "The officers who detained you acted outside the law. The arrest was a mistake, but there's something more to it." Briana's heart skipped a beat. She had always believed in the system, even if her experience had been a far cry from the justice she had hoped for. Now, it seemed that there was more to the situation than just a wrongful arrest. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Why was I arrested in the first place?" Agent Harris leaned forward, his fingers steepled in front of him. "We've discovered that you were targeted. This wasn't a random incident." He paused, watching her reaction closely. "The arrest was orchestrated based on false intelligence that someone in the department fabricated. We don't know yet who, but we intend to find out." Briana's mind spun. She had been wrongfully arrested, yes, but someone had actively set her up. The realization hit her with a cold, almost paralyzing force. Her pulse quickened and her body tensed as she processed the implications. This wasn't a mistake anymore. This was a deliberate action. The officers had been used to carry out someone else's plan. So it wasn't just the officers being careless? Briana asked, her voice tight with frustration. "No." Harris shook his head. "This was more than that. Someone wanted you detained, Ms. Walker, and we need to know why." He paused again, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea who might have a reason to target you?" Briana shook her head, thoughts racing in her mind. She had lived a quiet life in Riverton, kept to herself mostly. She couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt her, let alone frame her for something she hadn't done. "I have no idea," she said, frustration mounting. "I don't know why I was targeted. I'm just a teacher. I don't have any enemies. It's possible that someone's been monitoring your activities." Agent Harris's voice was steady but carried an underlying urgency. "We're still investigating, but your name came up in connection to something much larger than just a random arrest." Briana's eyes widened. Her thoughts were becoming a whirlwind of possibilities. Had her simple life, her quiet teaching job, somehow connected her to something dangerous, something hidden, something they didn't want her to know about? Her stomach churned with the uncertainty of it all. Why her? Why now? As Agent Harris spoke, Briana couldn't help but notice the bustling outside the small room. More agents were entering and exiting the station, carrying files and documents. Briana could feel the gravity of the situation deep in her bones. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She had become part of something much bigger than herself. "Whoever did this to you is trying to send a message," Agent Harris continued. "This wasn't about you specifically, but about using you to get to something bigger, and we need to find out what that is." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Briana sat there, her hands trembling as she tried to wrap her mind around the implications. "What's the next step?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll keep you updated, Ms. Walker, but right now, I need you to trust us." Agent Harris stood up and walked toward the door, but paused for a moment. "You might not have wanted to be involved in this, but now you are, and we're going to need your help." As the door clicked shut behind him, Briana was left alone in the small room. The silence felt suffocating. She didn't know who had done this, and she certainly didn't know why, but the reality was clear. Someone was after her, and that someone was trying to use the police to get to her. Briana's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. She had no answers, only more questions. Why had she been chosen? What had she done to deserve this? Who had been watching her? And why did this feel like it was just the beginning? The weight of the situation started to settle in. She wasn't just a victim of a wrongful arrest. She had become entangled in something far more dangerous. And with each passing second, it felt like the world around her was closing in. As the minutes ticked by, Briana finally stood up, determined to take control of her situation. She wasn't going to sit by and let this pass. She needed answers. Answers that the FBI might not even have. She had to find out who was behind all of this. The FBI agents were all over the station now. Briana couldn't help but watch as the chaos unfolded before her eyes. She had been sitting quietly in the interrogation room, trying to digest everything, when the door swung open. Two agents entered. Agent Harris and a tall, broad-shouldered man she hadn't met yet. His face was grim, the kind of face that made Briana's stomach churn in anticipation of something bad. "We need to talk to you." Agent Harris's voice was calm, but Briana could tell that something was off. He didn't look at her, but instead gave a quick glance to his partner, who nodded in response. "What's going on?" Briana asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. The pressure of this situation was starting to suffocate her, and her heart raced as she waited for their answer. The tall agent spoke this time. "We've just received intel that the police officers who arrested you were part of a larger operation." He paused for a moment, studying her closely. "This is more than a mistake. It's bigger than what we thought." The words hit Briana like a slap. What was going on? A larger operation? The arrest was supposed to be a mistake, right? It was supposed to be a case of mistaken identity. But now the FBI was involved, and it sounded like something much darker was going on. "What does that mean?" Briana asked, her voice trembling despite herself. "It means that your arrest wasn't random, Briana." Agent Harris walked toward her, his expression hardening. "We believe that the officers who detained you were working with a bigger network, and we've just uncovered some disturbing connections." He paused again, looking at his partner for confirmation. The other agent, who was now standing next to the door, finally spoke. "These officers are linked to a criminal syndicate. We've been investigating them for months. We don't know how you're connected, but you've been used as part of their operation." Briana could feel her legs begin to shake beneath her. Criminal syndicate? She had been dragged into something like that? This was no longer just a case of police misconduct. It was something much worse. "Are you saying I've been framed?" Briana's voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. "Yes," the tall agent replied. "We believe you were deliberately targeted. You've been caught up in something much bigger than you ever imagined." The gravity of the situation began to sink in. Briana had spent her whole life trying to stay out of trouble. She had done everything right, graduated from college, become a respected teacher, and built a life for herself in Riverton. She had never been involved in anything criminal, yet here she was, wrongfully arrested, and now linked to a criminal network she knew nothing about. "But why me?" Briana asked, feeling helpless. "Why did they choose me? What do I have to do with any of this?" "That's what we need to find out," Agent Harris replied. "We believe you may have unknowingly crossed paths with someone important in their organization. They've used you, Briana." The words stung. She couldn't comprehend it. Who could possibly want to target her? She was just a teacher, an innocent woman trying to live a quiet life. Her brother was the one who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, not her. Yet here she was, sitting in a room with two FBI agents, hearing that her life was somehow connected to a criminal network. It didn't make sense. "We're not sure who exactly was behind this yet," the tall agent continued, breaking into her thoughts. "But we're going to find out, and we need your help to do that." "My help?" Briana felt a surge of anger. "Why should I help you? You're the reason I'm here. I've been wrongfully detained by the same people you're saying I need to help you investigate." The tension in the room was palpable as Briana's frustration spilled over. She had been abused, misjudged, and now she was being told that she was part of some bigger plan. It didn't feel real. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but all she could do was listen to the agents as they laid out the next steps. "We know this is hard to take in," Agent Harris said quietly, "but we need you to trust us. We have an opportunity to take down this network once and for all. If we can connect the dots and find out who's behind all this, we'll make sure you're exonerated and help you get your life back. But we need you to stay involved." Briana took a deep breath, her mind still racing. She couldn't let the anger control her. She had to think logically, even though everything inside her wanted to shut down. "Okay, I'll do it." She finally spoke, her voice steady. "But I need to know everything, all of it." "You'll have all the information you need," Agent Harris promised. "But this won't be easy. We're going up against powerful people. We need to stay sharp." Briana nodded, her jaw set in determination. She had already lost so much, her brother, her freedom, and now her peace of mind. But there was one thing she would not lose, her resolve. She would uncover the truth no matter what it took. Briana spent the next few days caught in a whirlwind of chaos. After agreeing to cooperate with the FBI, her life had become a balancing act between her desire to clear her name and the looming dangers that came with exposing the corrupt officers behind her arrest. Her mind constantly raced, trying to piece together the puzzle of how she had become caught in this web of lies. She had always led an uncomplicated life, until now. With the FBI's help, Briana was granted temporary release, but she was far from free. She was placed under surveillance, and every step she took seemed to be watched by the eyes of the FBI. For now, they needed her to stay quiet while they gathered evidence, but they also needed her to keep her ears open. The next week felt like an eternity. The FBI had filled her with promises of justice, but the tension gnawed at her every second. As they delved deeper into their investigation, new information started surfacing. The police officers who had arrested her were part of a larger, dangerous network, one that stretched far beyond the confines of Riverton. It turned out that the officers weren't just corrupt, they were involved in illegal activities, including money laundering and human trafficking. Briana's name had been inadvertently tied to them through her work at the school. She had taught some of the children who were connected to a local gang, and unknowingly, she had become part of the network's web. But what was even more disturbing was the connection between Officer Sloan, the officer who had arrested her, and a high-ranking politician from the city. The deeper the FBI dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a case of a corrupt police officer abusing his power. This was a systematic conspiracy that ran deep within the heart of the local government. As the investigation unfolded, Kendra and Marcus became her closest allies. They kept her grounded, constantly reminding her to stay focused and calm. But there were moments when Briana couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking through a shadowy maze with no way out. One afternoon, after receiving an anonymous tip-off, Agent Harris arranged a private meeting with Briana. He had something important to share, something that might just be the key to breaking the case wide open. They met at an undisclosed location, away from the prying eyes of the public and the media. The small cafe was dimly lit, and Agent Harris slid into the booth with a file in hand, his face grim. "We've been digging deeper into Sloan's connections," Harris began, his voice low. "There's a list of names, a list of high-profile people involved. But what we found, Briana, was something bigger. Sloan wasn't acting alone. He was following orders from someone much higher up the chain." Briana's pulse quickened. Orders? Who was pulling the strings? Who was the mastermind behind it all? Harris slid the file across the table to Briana. "These names will shake the foundation of Riverton." He paused for effect. "We're talking about people in the mayor's office, some of the city's top businessmen, and even people in the judicial system. They've been covering up illegal activities for years, and it's all connected to the same corrupt network that Sloan was involved in." The revelation hit Briana like a tidal wave. Her city, her home, wasn't just tainted by corruption. It was rotten to the core. But the shocking part came next. "Briana, there's something you need to know." Agent Harris leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sloan wasn't supposed to kill your brother. That wasn't part of the plan." Briana froze. Her brother's death had been planned? She had always thought it was a mistake, a tragic mistake. But now it seemed like something much darker was at play. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Sloan was supposed to intimidate your brother, not kill him. He was meant to be a warning. But things went wrong. Sloan acted out of rage, and that's why we have the opportunity we do now. Your brother's death was never supposed to happen. It made everything spiral out of control." Briana felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Her brother had never been a target. He had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this was something else entirely. It was as if Jamal's life had been a pawn in a dangerous game, a game she never knew existed. "I want to know who's behind this." Briana's voice was steady now, her anger slowly building. "I want to take them down. I want them to pay for everything they've done." Harris looked at her with a mixture of respect and concern. "Briana, this is bigger than you think. This isn't just about one officer. This is about an entire system that has been operating in the shadows for years. We need to be careful. Every move we make will be watched." Briana nodded, her jaw set in determination. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when her brother's death had ignited something in her, something she couldn't ignore. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "Let's take them down." The next few days were filled with intense planning and strategy. The FBI agents were working round the clock, gathering information and preparing for the next phase of the investigation. Briana felt more like a pawn in this game of political corruption, but she had made up her mind. She would stop at nothing to bring justice to her brother, even if it meant exposing the entire system. Every day the pressure mounted, the walls were closing in, and Briana knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. But would it be enough to bring down the network? The final days before the big reveal felt like an eternity. Briana's days blurred together as she prepared for the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment when the corrupt police network would be exposed and justice would finally be served. The FBI had gathered enough evidence to make their move, but the stakes were higher than ever. Briana knew that if they weren't careful, the entire operation could go up in flames. The key to breaking the system lay in Sloan. They had to make sure he cooperated, but there was no telling how far he would go to protect his own skin. Sloan had been the linchpin in the operation, the one officer who was at the heart of the corrupt network. His arrest was crucial, but he wasn't going down without a fight. The FBI had a plan, and Briana was in the middle of it. She sat at the table in the FBI's war room, surrounded by agents who were working tirelessly to prepare for the public takedown. Agent Harris was going over the final details, his sharp eyes scanning the documents before him. Briana had never felt so far removed from her quiet everyday life. Now she was a part of something bigger than she could have ever imagined, a fight against the corrupt system that had stolen her brother's life. "Everything's in place, Briana," Agent Harris said, looking up from his paperwork. "We move in tomorrow. Sloan and his associates won't know what hit them." Briana nodded. The FBI raid was planned to hit the police station and the criminal network at once. It wasn't just about the officers who had been involved in her wrongful arrest. It was about exposing the entire corruption, starting with Sloan. "What about the press?" Briana asked, her mind ticking over the potential consequences. "We're keeping the press out of it until we make the arrests," Harris replied. "Once Sloan's behind bars, we'll release the information. But we need to make sure we get everyone at once. If we tip off anyone, this could fall apart." Briana felt a surge of nervous excitement. She had come so far, and now, the end was in sight. She wanted revenge, but what she wanted more was justice, real, lasting change. That night, Briana barely slept. She lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. Her brother's face appeared in her mind, his laughter, his dreams, everything that was stolen. She felt a deep ache in her chest, a reminder of how much had been taken from her. The anger, once a distant fire, was now an all-consuming flame. Sloan would pay, but it wasn't just him. It was the system. It was everyone who had gotten away with corruption, with racism, and with destroying lives like her brother's. She had been silent for too long. Now she was going to make them all listen. The following morning, Briana woke early. The air was tense, thick with anticipation. She met Agent Harris and the rest of the team at the FBI headquarters. The agents were in full gear, their faces hard with determination. Briana, though nervous, was ready. She had made her decision. There was no turning back. As the team prepared to head out, Agent Harris looked at her one last time. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Briana stood taller, her eyes unwavering. "I've never been more ready. Let's end this." The team quickly made their way to the police station, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Briana couldn't help but feel the sense of power growing within her, a feeling she'd never known before. She wasn't just a victim anymore, she was part of something bigger. Her fight for her brother was now a fight for everyone who had been wronged by a corrupt system. As the FBI stormed the police station, Briana stood at the back, watching the agents move swiftly and decisively. Sloan's office was the first target. The agents moved in, their guns drawn, but Briana didn't flinch. She had already seen everything she needed to see. It was over. She walked toward the back office where Sloan was being held. His face, once so confident and arrogant, now looked defeated. His hands were shackled, and he was being led away by the agents. Briana stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything. She wanted him to feel the weight of his actions. She wanted to make him understand what he had done. But all she could do was look him in the eyes, her expression unwavering. "You ruined my family." The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything else. Sloan looked away, his guilt too heavy to confront. "You're done," Briana said, her voice cold and final. "I'll make sure you never hurt anyone again." The agents quickly moved to secure the rest of the station, arresting the other officers involved in the illegal network. Briana watched as Sloan was driven away, the once confident man now a broken figure in the back of the police car. It felt surreal to see him in this position, the hunter now the prey. As the FBI continued to raid the building, Briana felt the weight of the victory settle over her. Justice had been served, finally, and with it a sense of peace, though it didn't erase the pain. Nothing could ever bring Jamal back, but as the agents wrapped up the operation and the press swarmed outside, Briana knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The fight for justice would continue, but for the first time in her life, Briana felt like the system was finally listening. The battle was over, but the war for justice, that was just starting.